Standing before you, as was said, is Lwando Mhluzi, all the way from PE, Eastern Cape. I am from Fountain of Life Christian School. I will be presenting to you a famous speech, rather by the great, the late Martin Luther King Jr., who delivered it in 1963 at the Lincoln Memorial, Washington, D.C., United States. Therefore, I ask you to enjoy. I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation. This momentous decree came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro is still not free. 100 years later, the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and the chains of discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives in an island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. 100 years later, the Negro is still languishing in American society and finds himself in exile in his own land. And so we've come here today to dramatize a shameful condition. In a sense, we've come to our nation's capital to cash a check. When the architects of our republic wrote the magnificent words of the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, they were signing a promissory note to which every American was to adhere. This was a promise that all men, yes, black men and white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is obvious today that America has defaulted on this promissory note. Insofar as the citizens of color are concerned, instead of honoring this sacred obligation, America has given the Negro people a bad check. A check which has come back marked insufficient funds. But we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. We refuse to believe that there is sufficient funds in the great vaults of opportunity of this nation. And so we've come to cash this check. A check that will give us upon demand the riches of justice and equality. We have also come to this howled spot to remind America of the fierce urgency of now. This is no time to engage in the luxury of cooling off or to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy. Now is the time to lift our nation from the quicksands of racial injustice to the solid rock of brotherhood. Now is the time to rise from the dark and desolate city of segregation to the great, great chain of unity. Now is the time to make justice a reality for all of God's children. It would be fatal for the nation to overlook the urgency of the moment. This summer of the Negro's legitimate discontent will not pass until there's an invigorating autumn of freedom and equality. For 1963 is not an end, but a beginning. And those who hope that the Negro needed time to blow off steam and will not be content will have a rude awakening if this nation returns to business as usual. For there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the great foundations of our nation until the bright day of justice emerges. But there is something that I must say to my people who stand on the warm threshold which leads into the palace of justice. In the process of gaining our rightful place, let us not be guilty of wrongful deeds. Let us not seek to satisfy our thirst for freedom by drinking from the cup of bitterness and hatred. Let us forever conduct our struggle on the high plane of dignity and discipline. Let us not allow our creative protest to degenerate into physical violence. Again and again, we must rise to the majestic heights of meeting physical force with soul force. The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to a distrust of all white people. For our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied up with our destiny. And they've come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. There is no turning back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will you be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with the fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We can never be satisfied as long as a Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and a Negro in New York believes there's nothing for which to vote. No, and no, we are not satisfied, and we will not be satisfied until justice rolls down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. I'm not unmindful that some of you here have come out of great trials and tribulations. Some of you have come from areas where your quest for freedom left you battered by the storms of persecution and staggered by the winds of police brutality. You have been the veterans of trait of suffering. Continue to work with that unknown suffering is redemptive. Go back to Mississippi. Go back to Alabama. Go back to South Carolina. Go back to Louisiana. Go back to the slums and ghettos of our northern cities, knowing that somehow this situation can and will be changed. Let us not wallow in the valley of despair, I say to you today, my friends. And so even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. It is a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will one day sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, sweltering with the heat of injustice, will one day be changed into an oasis of freedom and equality. Oh, I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today. Woo! I have a dream that one day, even the state of Alabama, with its vicious racists, with his governor having his lips jumping with the words interposition and nullification. Right there, down there, in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white girls and white boys as brothers and sisters. I have a dream today. I have a dream that one day every valley shall be exalted, every mountain and hill shall be made low, the rough places will be made plain, and the glory of the Lord shall be revealed, and all flesh shall see it together. This is our hope. This is the faith that I go back to the south with. With this faith, we'll be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we'll be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we'll be able to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that someday, somehow, we will be free. This will be the day. This will be the day when all of God's children will be able to sing in new meaning. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride. From every mountainside, let freedom ring. And if America is to be a great nation, then let freedom ring from the prodigious hilltops of New Hampshire. Let freedom ring from the mighty mountains of New York. Let freedom ring from Pennsylvania. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California. Let freedom ring from the Stone Rock Mountains of Colorado. But not only that, let freedom ring from the Luca Mountain of Tennessee. Let freedom ring from Mississippi. Every molehill, every hill, let freedom ring. And when this happens, when we allow freedom to ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, every city, every state, we'll be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the old Negro spiritual. Free at last! Free at last! Thank God Almighty, we are free at last. Thank you.